Let's look at Cisco's Packet Tracer. A packet tracer is a simulator that has a wide variety of Cisco products. It emulates a wide variety of Cisco products, and it lets you um, build, configure, and test network designs. And we're going to use it for um, a few lab exercises, and it's free. So if you go here, and I'll include this um, address for you, you need to register or enroll, um, and then you'll use your email account as a login. And once you do that, you can download Packet Tracer. And there's also uh, several free courses here that are uh, not bad, really. So this is a good deal. It's free. And this is what it looks like when you run it. I've opened this up. Now, with this version, every time you uh, open it up, you have to log in, which is a little annoying, but it's not the end of the world. I'm just curious which version this is. Do we have a version number 7.2? Okay. So let me show you how this works. The big white area here is your work area. If you look down at the bottom, these are all devices that you can use for your network designs. So uh, if you put your mouse over one of these icons, this one here is for network devices, and when that is selected, you get all of these. Now these are all routers. Um, the next thing here are end devices. You got a PC, a laptop, a server, etc. Components, connections, connectors, miscellaneous, not even sure what that is. So let's go back and look at these network devices. And I'm going to pick a router here. And let's just try it 2901. And you'll notice I simply uh, held the mouse button down, and drug it out. So um, this is a Cisco 2901 router, and if you want to change the name here, you can do it thusly. If you click on this, and this was a left click, and this is one of the things that I think takes some getting used to. Ordinarily, you would expect to do a right click, but for Packet Tracer, left clicks are the ones that are the most interesting. Um, Here, when you left click on this, you get another window. Now what you're looking at here is the physical part of this, and this is actually a representation of the back end of this router. Um, and these tell you what is connected so far. Config. So these are modules you can actually, let's see, you can read down here. This particular module here, this gives you the explanation of when you click on one of these. And for our purposes, we're probably going to stay with things that are pretty plain vanilla. But you can here actually add things into these um, plug-in module slots, for lack of a better term. By the way, that's the front of the device right there. That's the back. For our purposes, let's go on to config. Now, these are all things that you can configure on this router. And what will happen here is, ordinarily you would do this on the command line, and this is what you see if you click on CLI. So you'll notice right now it says router config IF. That means configuration of the interface. And I'm actually looking at interface, the gigabit interface 0/1. And that's because of something I clicked over here. Well, there it is right there. So this config here is just a shortcut method for configuring the router. In the real world, you do this. So we're going to do some of both. So at this point, I need to configure my interfaces, and to do that I need to give it IP addresses. Each of these interfaces an IP address. So I'm just going to use some numbers from the private range. So this interface I'm going to just randomly assign. Well, not randomly, it's like the first, one of the first private addresses. 192.168.1.1. It wouldn't be unusual for your router at in your home to be using this as its IP number. And you notice when I clicked in subnet mask, I got this. This is the default class C address mask. And notice what's going on down here. These are the equivalent iOS commands, and the iOS is the operating system. And not sure why we got 3 or 4 copies of that. It's not changing anything. What I mean is lines of the same thing. So this kind of gives you an idea of what the equivalent would be if you actually type this in from the command line. So that's one of my interfaces, and now I need to do the other one. Now there's a little gotcha here. Notice where it says port status. Let's go and turn that on while we're here. And notice what's going on here. The router is the equivalent iOS command line command for what I just did was no shutdown. You can abbreviate that no shut, and as you if you fool with Cisco devices very much, you get used to typing in no shut. So this just brings the interface up, which means it's listening now. And again, the CLI, you see the same thing there. And usually we get another prompt back. So we'll see what happens here. Now let's go over here and add some other devices to this, and then we'll test our configuration. So I'm going to go to End Devices here, and I'm just going to pick a PC. And I'll put the PC right there. Now, I could actually connect these directly to each other, but that's not typically the way we do it in networking, because we want to have more devices at our disposal. So I need to go find a switch. So router switches, let's see, what do we have to work with here? 2960, that ought to do it. So now we have this is a 24 port switch, and if you hold your mouse over this, you get this flash. These are all the interfaces. Notice they're all fast Ethernet interfaces. That's 100 megabits per second. They're all down right now because nothing's hooked to them. So let's configure this. I'm going to go over here. Let's do this. Go to your connections, and we want just a Cat5 cable. Now that's a console cable. That should be the Cat5. I say Cat5, it's just a copper straight through cable. If you look over here in the middle, right there, it's hard to see. They'll tell you what you have here. Now for our purposes, we need this copper straight through. Every once in a while, you might need a copper crossover, so that's it right there. The console cable will be used for connecting like this PC directly to the router to configure it, and that's possible to represent that too. But what I want right now is this copper straight through. So you click on this, and you can go up here, and it looks like a little spool of wire, doesn't it? So if you hold it here, if you click the left mouse button, these are the ports that are available to you on this default PC. I want the fast Ethernet. And now I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to click left click, and I'll just connect this to the, it doesn't really matter, fast Ethernet 01. So that connects the computer to the switch. Now I need to do that again, and I'm going to go from, and I'll use this port here, and I want to go over to the router, and these are the ports available to me here. And remember, I've already configured the gigabit Ethernet 0/0, so I'll connect to it. Now we're not done yet. I have assigned an IP address to this router interface. I need to configure the IP address on the PC. So again, left click, and this is similar to what we were looking at before with the router. These are modules. For our purposes, I'm just going to go straight to config. And if you look at settings here, this is what you see here, global settings. You need to do this, I think this is where the only place it shows up. The global settings here, you need a default gateway if you want to get off the network. Now, don't worry about DNS, etc. We'll worry about that later. Now click on the fast Ethernet. So our IP configuration here, we can either configure DHCP, which we're not going to do that yet. We're just going to do a static. The IP address, and this is going to be on the 192.168.1 network, and I'm just going to use 101 on this one. Remember, 192.168.1.1 is the router interface, and it's also what I set the default gateway to. Click here, just take the default mask, port status. This one's on automatically. And now, while we're here, there's something else we can do. If we click on desktop, these are all the things that are available to us. And I'm going to click on the command prompt, and let's test our connection and configuration. So I'm going to run a ping command, 192.168.1.1, and press enter. And notice I get a reply from 192.168.1.1, which is this interface right here. So that tells me that I've got the correct cabling here. I've got this configured properly to talk to this interface on this router. So we're good so far. Let's, and you can just click here, and that window is still out there. You can get it back to it anytime you want or need to. That's one side of this. Now, this part here would be a local area network, and the router is the device that lets you get to another network. So let's create ourselves another network. So you click on network devices here and go over to switches, and let's grab ourselves another 2960, and we'll put it right there, and go back to, let's see, we want end devices this time. We want another PC. We'll pull it up here, and you can move these around if you need to. Connections, copper. This time we're going to go from the gigabit Ethernet 0/1 network interface over to the switch, and again, these are left clicks, and I'll go to the port 24, and notice you get little red triangles down because we haven't configured this this particular interface. We haven't brought it up, so notice over here we've got green triangles, which tells me that the interfaces are up and capable of transmitting. So let's finish wiring this one, and left click Ethernet. We'll just do port 1 and the fast Ethernet port over here. Now remember, recall a while ago, this one come up immediately, this port. So left click, config, and under settings here, global settings, let's configure the gateway. Now this needs to be a different network. So 192.168, and for this one I'm going to use, I used 1.0 on the other side. Well, let's go with 2. Not very imaginative, but we just need to have a different network. So we're good there. Let's just check. We're good with the gateway. We still have to do the configuration, the IP configuration of this particular machine. So 192.168.2.101. So notice this PC needs to be on the same network as the router, and I just indicated I'm going to configure the router to use 192.168.2.1. I haven't done it yet, but that's what by setting the default gateway to that number, and that's what I'm telling you I'm going to do. So that interface is already up, so we're good there. I need to come over here back to the router and go to this interface and put an IP address on it. So 192.168.2.1, and then take the default subnet mask, and let's bring the interface up, and notice how that changed. And then once we get some communications going here, that'll change to up as well. Now we can actually try this from here. If you want to go to the command line here, we just have to be careful where we're at. We've got no shut. I'm going to press enter. So I'm back to the config interface. I need to go down a level, actually down a couple layers. So from this prompt I can type ping 192.168.2.101 and press enter. Now notice here, this time I'm pinging from the router. A period means it didn't work, and the exclamation points means it does. Now their first ping, it sends 5 packets, failed, and that's not unusual. This is a pretty realistic simulation, but the other 4 did, and if we run that again, I'm going to just press the up arrow. Recall the previous command. See, all 5 of those succeeded. So what I've showed you so far is how to pull uh, the devices out. And simple network here, this is one local area network on this side, and here's another local area network on this side. And to get communications, well, that's one thing we haven't tried yet, is it? Let's do that. So I'll click on this, and I want to ping 192.168.2.101, and let's try that. So I'm getting a reply. So this ping is going from this computer to the switch to the router, through the router, out this interface to the other switch, to that computer, and then back. It retraces its steps. And we'll play with simulations here later on. If we didn't get a ping back, we could have also done this. And again, up arrow. So look what I did here. I pinged, I'm over here, this is the 192.168.1.0 network, and this happens to be 192.168.1.101. This interface is 192.168.1.1, this is 2.1. By pinging 2.1, I proved that the packet made it through the router. Now, if this had failed, that would have told me that there's something wrong between me and the router or in the router itself. So, by pinging, and this works the same way in the real world, by pinging, assuming that the ping, the echo reply is enabled, by pinging, you can oftentimes localize a problem, so therefore you can find it and fix it. So, getting back to what we've done here, we have two LANs, two local area networks, with an intervening router, and of course this is the way we do networks. We have switches here, and I tested it all the way through by pinging, and actually, if you'll recall, I pinged as I went. When I configured this and this interface, I immediately pinged from this PC to this interface. That tells me that's okay. I did the same thing over here, and then once I established that, I pinged all the way across. So I like to test things as I go. So of course you can move these things around. There's a whole bunch of other things we can do here. I just wanted to show you a simple internetwork, and inter means that there's two involved. So here's the first LAN, and here's the second local area network. And in this case, we didn't have to do any special configuration to the router other than just configuring the two interfaces. Because this network and this network are directly connected to the router. And by default, a router will route between its directly connected networks. Later on, we're going to add another router or two or three. And in that case, we're going to have to do some more configuration to the router. But for now, with this simple network, we've done everything we needed to do. So this is just an introduction to what you can do with Packet Tracer.